New York City working class understood that it was absolutely necessary for them to get free higher education so that they would be aware, they would be articulate enough to be able to actually organize a society that was in the interests of working class people. So CUNY, City College, was not bestowed on the working class out of the good graces of the bosses or the bourgeoisie, but it came out of the fact that workers had fought for free higher education in New York. And as a matter of fact, just as an aside, the New York Times, the working class was so militant and so prolific in New York that it had many, many working class newspapers. The New York Times came into existence in the 1850s to counter the existence and the struggles of the New York City working class and to give it a more middle class bent. So all of you come from a tradition of struggle. And this is how CUNY actually began. And you should all be proud of the fact that you're continuing to fight. Okay, so CUNY was established, unfortunately, only there for immigrant communities, but male and white males. So women didn't get to go to school, and certainly non-white immigrants didn't get to go to CUNY either. But it was the establishment of the idea that it was absolutely necessary for everybody to have the right to have an education. As time went on, during the 1930s, there was the rise of fascism, especially in places like Italy and Germany. And the president, the then president, whose name was Albert Robertson, was pro-Nazi and pro-fascist. So he invited students from Italy to come to speak to the students at City College. And since many of the students at City College by that time were Jews, they took exception to the fact that, and leftists and many communists, so they took exception to the fact that Robert, actually, there's still, strangely enough, for anybody who goes to the city, there's still a statue of Robinson at in the main building of the Great Hall at CCNY. And why that hasn't been taken down, it seems like that might be some struggle that people could engage in. Anyway, so Robinson was a fascist or pro-fascist. He had confrontations with the students who emptied out of the schools, organized mass strikes, and in response to those mass strikes, not only was there a major police presence, and ironically after that there was a move to keep the police off of campus, but at that point the police came in with their horses and attacked the students. And so Robinson institutionalized the idea of anti-communist overseers called the Raccorday Commission, which set up teachers and teachers and workers at the school who had any sort of sympathetic leanings to the Communist Party. And at that point, in the 1930s, the Communist Party had done tremendous organizing within the education, within the factories, organized unions, and the Raccorday Commission was designed to weed out the communists. And essentially, there were committees set up by the commission whereby right-wingers could testify against teachers. I think 50 teachers had lost their jobs by that time. So this commission was set up in order to prevent people from maintaining their jobs, but also the commission was behind closed doors. So that, in fact, none of the people who were accused of being, and this is the beginning of really ramping up anti-communism in the United States. So people who were accused of being communists were never allowed to see their accusers. All that had to happen was there were 3 people said, yes, this person is a communist, and that person was summarily fired. But there was tremendous pushback. Thousands of people pushed back in order to prevent Robinson from pulling these anti-communist moves. But, you know, the United States was heading towards war, and then eventually heading towards tremendous anti-communism after the war was over. By 1949, there was another strike, and this is, you know, Conor is going to be speaking from 1969 on, so which is definitely a change of demographics and a positive change. But once again, people had to fight in order to have this happen. So this is a picture in 1949 where the president, whose name was Wright at the time, continued to employ 2 teachers, one of whom was an anti-Semite and had no problem and argued that the plot against him was an anti-communist plot. And the other one was Professor Davis, who was a racist. And interestingly enough, there were dormitories at City College at the time, and this guy, Professor Davis, attempted to keep Black and white students, because there were some Black students at the time, from sharing dormitories. So there was a trial. There were thousands of students that came out against anti-Semitism and against racism. Once again, the police were brought in, and they were charged by police forces. Ultimately, by the end of the strike, both of the teachers managed to retain their jobs. Knickerbocker, who was the anti-Semite, nothing was completely exonerated. Davis, it was obvious that the guy was a racist. I mean, he was keeping Black and white students separate from each other in dormitories. He got demoted, but he managed to keep his job in any case. The strike lasted 5 days. But there was a tremendous outpouring of student support for the strike. And actually, I remember going to an anniversary of the strike, I think it was in '79, where these students who had gone to City were still debating whether they should have ended the strike or not. But it was obvious.
Hey, Carol, sorry, it's Taryn. You're coming up on time. You got 2 more minutes. Sorry.
Okay, that's fine, Taryn, thanks. So what's going on now is in keeping with the tradition of the City University striking against injustice, striking against unfairness, striking against a CUNY Central that's defending the politicians as opposed to defending the people who teach and go to school there. So we're trying to keep up that tradition by organizing this great strike, and we're hoping that everybody will participate in this struggle, because it's good not only for the faculty but for the students as well. Okay, I'm done.
Thank you, Carol. I wanted to jump in just for a second to let you all know that we are recording this session so that people can review it later. And I think only the image of the person speaking is being recorded, but if you're not comfortable with your image being on there, feel free to turn off your camera. Yeah, that's it. Sorry, Conor, please go ahead.
Can everyone hear me okay and see the images okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Tremendous respect for everyone joining this teach-in today. And I have to say it's a great honor to be talking about the City University of New York struggles, so we can think about how to apply all the lessons from these struggles in our own present moment. So I have the joy of being able to share about from the late 1960s up until the present. And I will do my best to cram easily lifetimes of lessons of struggles into less than 10 minutes. So some of y'all may be familiar with the story that Carol had shared, but for some of y'all, CUNY's militant histories may come from the time period of the late 1960s. In particular, in 1969, in April 1969, at the City College of New York, Black and Puerto Rican students led a campus strike and occupation of several buildings. They renamed the campus Harlem University. This was a strike that spread to other CUNY schools. Students were demanding that the curriculum be decolonized, that it be bringing in Black, Third World, Puerto Rican, Global South studies. They also wanted to change CUNY's admissions to bring in increasingly students who were non-white, who were graduating from New York City's high schools into CUNY, which was still by this time intensely segregated. Around 90% of CUNY was European descended, yet the high school population and the demographics of New York City overall were certainly not. So students with support from faculty and community members struck to transform CUNY. And they actually achieved this. In 1970, ethnic and gender studies programs were created in different parts of CUNY. The strikes also expanded access to all students graduating from New York City public schools, which is known as open admissions. And as you can see from the graph up top, looking at 1967, 68, 69, up until 1970, there was a huge influx of, in particular, Black and Puerto Rican, but also other Latinx and Asian students. And so this was a real watershed moment where the largest public urban university in the United States was transformed by direct action, by people building coalition across their differences in order to create the university that they wanted. With any kind of fight, there are sometimes counterattacks. And so some of y'all may be familiar with the story that a few years after this had occurred, in 1975, New York City was undergoing a financial crisis. And the federal government basically said that they would not bail New York City out unless they started to charge tuition at CUNY, and as well as make other kinds of cuts to social services. So sometimes when we refer to the terms austerity or structural adjustment, these are the kinds of programs where CUNY was itself a laboratory for these kinds of real shock doctrine kinds of measures that the US inflicts upon other countries around the world. It also happened to us here in New York, here in CUNY. So similar to other kinds of situations, in 1975, there was basically an emergency financial control board, which was made up of bankers, corporate elites. They charged tuition in CUNY. They laid off thousands of teachers and other public sector workers, increased subway fare. Any kinds of public services they thought should be privatized and run like businesses. So when we use the term neoliberalism, this is a really great example. And in many ways, like I said, it was a test case to see how this could then be adopted across the entire United States. There is an irony that in 1976, this was the first year, because of these struggles for open admissions, that the majority of CUNY students were Black, Latinx, Asian. This was also the first year that tuition was imposed across the board. And this is a contradiction that we need to be mindful of that has dramatically shaped our own present moment of rising tuition increases. So as y'all can see, and sorry that these graphs are a little bit out of date, but for 40 years since this has occurred, city and state funding has decreased while tuition and adjunct teaching positions have increased. So now, as you can see, student tuition pays for almost half of CUNY's budget, and adjuncts are 60% of CUNY faculty. So we can look at this one way, thinking about this is a real detriment, a form of disempowerment. But if you look at it another way, this shows that actually things like adjuncts and their faculty members taking action together, or students taking action, doing something like withholding their tuition in a tuition strike, that actually our labor and our tuition is essential to CUNY running. So what we can give, we can also take away in order to try to transform our university anew. I want to talk a little bit about the last couple of decades, thinking about some education struggles that we can learn from. In 1989 and 1991, these were two flashpoints in CUNY struggles. In these two waves of struggles, Papa Cuomo, Mario Cuomo was trying to a wave of tuition increases and budget cuts. And in response, CUNY student coalitions would mobilize upwards of 15,000 students to be on the street. Massive demonstrations, massive walkouts. As you can see, this is at City Hall on the top left. On the top right, for those of you from City College, you'll notice that that's outside of the NAC building, the North Academic Center. And we see the sign, Cuomo's dream for CUNY includes people incarcerated. That's sadly something that Mario Cuomo's son, Andrew, has continued in his father's footsteps. But these are some examples of students of colors taking action on their campus, but then also in New York City. And similar to 1969, there was a wave of actions that would occur. When students from one CUNY school would get mobilized to take action, this has the potential to occur in a wave across the CUNY system. So this institution, very well poised to be able to create effects that actually can make broader changes in New York City altogether. I want to speak a little bit about the 2010s as well, because we're talking about our own context that we're being shaped by. So some of y'all may have been here in New York. Some of y'all may have even participated in these actions. In 2011, Occupy Wall Street, people in CUNY were actively involved in creating that. There was a November 2011 student strike of CUNY students organizing with students around New York City. So trying to break down any kinds of boundaries between public and private. In 2013 through 15, the CUNY administration was trying to straight up militarize our university by bringing back ROTC, Reserve Officers Training Corps, by bringing in a military general named David Petraeus to teach at CUNY, and other kinds of measures. Students fought back against that. CUNY students were also involved in the movement for Black Lives, the Black Lives Matter movement, making connections with other kinds of struggles of violence, policing, colonialism. As you can see, Black Lives Matter, Palestinian Lives Matter. This is a die-in that happened in 2014 at John Jay College. From 2018 up until the present, two formations, 7K or strike, and then Free CUNY emerged, basically demanding that adjuncts have their salaries doubled from poverty wages to almost not poverty wages. 7K or strike has since transitioned into what's now called rank and file action. And Free CUNY, in a couple of iterations, has been working on basically trying to make CUNY tuition free again. Just a couple more pieces to share. So right now, CUNY graduation rates are below 50%. This is not because CUNY students aren't brilliant, hard workers wanting to graduate. This is because of the real life situation of paying for tuition and bills, working hard in order to pass their classes. And CUNY actually knows this. So the community colleges and the senior colleges, there's ways that CUNY tries to dry up financial aid and then get students locked into education debt and then ultimately not graduate. This is something that a Free CUNY could avoid. We know that in the last semester that COVID-19 has made matters much worse. Many of our CUNY students and faculty and staff are people of colors. Many are immigrants who don't qualify for federal stimulus aid. So this is the state of the people who we're wanting to get involved with in order to transform CUNY. We know that making CUNY free and giving adjunct faculty and really all campus workers job stability, salary stability is possible. As you can see, in 2019, the city budget and the state budget were a whopping $92.2 billion and $176 billion. That included a massive $4.2 billion surplus. So we know that the money is absolutely there and that it actually takes people to pressure Governor Cuomo, Mayor de Blasio, but then also the wealthy elite in New York City who benefit from CUNY students, faculty and staff, who benefit from the university, but don't actually pay anything into this university. So what we're trying to do is to really welcome people into the struggle, welcome people into the case for a free CUNY, the case for a liberatory and anti-racist CUNY, but also to think about how students from y'all's position and the adjunct faculty and all faculty from our position, how we can collaborate to try to pressure for these changes to occur. And in the process to make CUNY the kind of university that could be ours, a real true people's university. So I'll stop there and thank you.
Thank you, Connor. Thank you both, Connor and Carol. That was wonderfully informative. I learned a lot. And I think you wrapped it up really well, Connor, with your explanation of why we need more people's support and why everybody has an interest, everybody has a stake in this. So to reiterate, we're recording, and if you came in during the people talking, please, you are very welcome to change your name as displayed to reflect your pronouns and your campus affiliation. You can do that by clicking on the 3 dots in the top right corner of your display triangle, or going to the participants list, hovering over your name, clicking on more, and you get to the rename thing. Next up, we have Sami Disu talking about the adjunct professor or adjunct experience. Sami is, he teaches at John Jay College and previously at Hunter College. He is he's a member of RAFA. And yeah, all right, go ahead.
Sami, sorry, just to interrupt. This is Boyda talking. I was very briefly booted from the call for unknown reasons. So if you had sent me a video, you wanted me to share it, but unfortunately I do not have that link anymore. So if you post it in the chat, I can share it. But apologies for that.
That's completely fine, Boyda. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I really appreciate it, especially with students being in finals week, making the time to come and participate in this virtual teaching. I really appreciate it. I will share the video in the chat box right after my presentation. It basically showed me in action as an adjunct activist, taking off my shirt to represent the issue of adjunct wage inequity, which is the reality of adjuncts in our 2-tiered faculty system at CUNY. And I have done that several times in the past. I've actually only taken off my shirt ever in protest because of the adjunct plight. And that's one way that I've been able to, I'm willing to contribute to highlighting the issue. Most of your adjuncts, most of your faculty are self-respecting people who want to do something of that nature, but I've been happy to do that because it gets attention, and the issues we are facing as adjuncts in terms of the contingency nature of our jobs, the fact that we don't really have job protection and we're paid such poverty wages. Those are serious enough reasons for those of us willing to take off our clothes to highlight that issue. I was happy to be invited to come and speak to you today about, excuse me, why adjuncts need a fighting union at this time. In talking about whether or not the Professional Staff Congress, our union, is even a fighting one. That's a controversial and sometimes a politically loaded conversation, but I think it's important in this case for us adjuncts to speak openly about the realities of our situation, and for students to also be aware of it, so that you can see the connections in a system which is highly underfunded. I'm talking about a public higher education system, and for us that's CUNY, that is highly underfunded, and we see the effects in various ways, one of which is the low paid nature of the part-time teaching force. So is Professional Staff Congress, my union, a fighting union? I think the answer has become very clear now that CUNY Central is proposing to cut potentially thousands of jobs. I've already received one non-reappointment notice from Hunter College, which is one of the places I teach. And many of us are expecting to receive the remainders of those non-reappointments after grade submission deadline, May 29th, and moving onwards. So a union's job, I think, or a role of the value of having a union is to protect jobs, right? That's one of the basic reasons why you would want to unionize. And here we are in 2020 spring, facing potentially thousands of job cuts to adjunct personnel, and our union is not really mobilizing in a way that that might help or might make CUNY think twice about going through with that decision. Yes, we are all participating in shows of force like caravans and the petition writing campaigns, and all of that's great. But in terms of what would actually make CUNY think twice about firing thousands of us, I think it's clear to see that our union is not there, and students need to know that reality. In fact, our union just about a week or two ago has been voting down resolutions brought forth by adjuncts who want the union to take a more militant stance to protect our jobs. We have rank and file action in particular has launched a pledge campaign, pledge grade campaign, which is asking adjuncts and all faculty, all teaching faculty, to delay submission of grades until the very last moment, which is May 28th. And as a stress test measure to determine whether we have the appetite to really do what we say we want to do, which is prevent thousands of adjuncts from being laid off in a week or less. That's really what I'm focused on as an adjunct right now. And I wanted us to just spend a bit more time in making the connections between what is potentially going to happen to adjuncts and the interest of students. I'm talking about the educational outcomes, right? If thousands of adjuncts get those non-reappointment notices in the next couple of days, that's going to potentially mean increased class sizes in the fall for our students across CUNY. It's also potentially going to mean that students will take a bit longer to graduate, because some of the courses a student might need in order to graduate and to fulfill all of their academic course requirements might just not be as available or might fill out. These are the kinds of scenarios that become a reality when you have thousands of adjuncts potentially being removed from the system. Preemptively, I may add. We have not heard from CUNY Central the exact extent to which there has been a drop in revenues to the budget, which is what is supposedly precipitating these job cuts, right? We've not heard from New York State the exact amount of the deficit to the budget, which will impact us indirectly, and which has been what CUNY Central is using as their justification to propose these job cuts. And this also goes to speak to the understanding that we are not yet a fighting union, because CUNY Central feels free to preemptively, right, before the numbers are clear, before we know how much the deficit is, they're willing to just simply non-reappoint all adjuncts who are on a semester to semester contract, which is the bulk, which is the largest section of the faculty in general at CUNY. So all of this is to say that adjuncts are really in a desperate position right now. We feel that we are being singled out, and the latest excuse for gutting our jobs and the healthcare that we need in a time of pandemic that comes with those jobs is this pandemic, right? That's what's being used. It's a typical move, and it's just it really is telling us what's potentially coming just after adjuncts are fired. There are college assistants, all who are mostly students, who are slated to be cut, non-teaching adjuncts, and even full-timers ultimately. We're all going to be affected, and by extension, the students who we are all here to serve. So it's really a very desperate time, and I think a critical time in CUNY's history, particularly with such a strong tradition of protest that Carol and Conor just walked us through. This is really a time when I'm hoping everybody in the community, including students, will join together with the spirit of what rank and file action is doing in trying to preserve jobs. I think I've probably reached my time. I will yield whatever time I have left to you. Thanks, Leah.
Perfectly timed, Sami.
Thank you very much, Sami. Let's go ahead and switch to Chris Mejia. He is a Brooklyn College senior and a member of Free CUNY, and he is going to tell us about those things. Go ahead, Chris.
I want to thank y'all for coming out today and participating in this talk, and engaging this teaching to actually try to fix the situation and fight for the CUNY we all deserve. So as we know, we are in the midst of a pandemic, a global health crisis, but CUNY is also in a crisis. And in a moment of crisis, what's happening is that it's being used to carry out politics of austerity that ultimately harm adjuncts and students. Like Conor spoke to, majority of CUNY students are students of color, first generation students. They need these institutions in order for social mobility, and they're struggling with real issues. It's not just statistics, right? In 2018, nearly 50,000 students reported being food insecure, meaning a large amount of students don't have access to nutrition. Not only that, roughly 48% of CUNY students in 2018 responded as being housing insecure, actually not having a place to live. So when we're talking about education, it's not only about also rising tuitions, it's also about the fact that students don't even have the basic necessities to access a proper education. And on top of that, what we're experiencing is a rising of tuition. And going back to what Conor spoke to, the contradictions aren't that hard to see. CUNY was free until 1976. And the majority of students at that time were working class white students. Yet, when the demographics of the university became majority people of color, working class people of color, that's when tuition was imposed. So what we're seeing is the shifting of burden of the state funding public education to it being funded by tuition. And ultimately, this is harming students and teachers with the proposition to get, fire teachers or dismiss teachers or teachers not being reappointed. What we're going to have is larger amounts of students in classroom. At the end of the day, that means more work for teachers and less resources for students. So when we're talking about a CUNY, we also have to mention that we have to engage in social justice struggles, right? It's not enough to also ask for bread and butter demands, but also we have to act for social justice demands because the two issues are very much intertwined. CUNY also has an issue with crumbling infrastructure and rising tuitions and teachers who are not paid well. And the reason is because of the students who are they teaching. They're students who are working class students of color. So how can we engage and develop an adequate response to this crisis, right? Maybe that's why we're here, but what can we do? And people like Free CUNY, like Rafa, have proposed some ways that we can fight this crisis. And it includes building solidarity. Some propositions have been with withholding grades, right? But also providing an A for all. Why? Because in that sense, you're creating solidarity with your students. You're showing that actually it's not about one side or the other. It's about all of us together. And yeah, building solidarity is very important because at the end of the day, we're both part of CUNY, and building a social justice struggle as well as a struggle for better working conditions for teachers allows us to gain the power to actually approach the struggle in a way that the community and social justice can come together to fight for the demands. I also want to talk about the fact that the contradictions, again, are not that hard to see. New York is a place where capital flows. 1 in 6 billionaires who live in the country live in New York City. And so it's not a question about not having the resources to actually have a free CUNY or to have teachers or that aren't dismissed or live in precarity or job insecurity. It's a question about political will. And if the history that Conor alluded to or Carol says anything, it says that the strategies that have been employed lately in the last 20 years have not been effective or have not worked. And that means we have to look at an alternative strategy. And we can find those alternative strategies in the history of CUNY itself. And that means engaging in struggle. That means direct action. That means potentially a strike that CUNY students are working towards. Because we have no other option. CUNY is being crushed. We are being harmed. And we have no choice but to unite and fight against the forces that try to oppress us. Yeah, I think that I'm gonna conclude there.
Thank you so much, Chris. Our final speaker is Christina Barrera, and she uses she, her pronouns, is a studio art MFA candidate at Hunter College. Please go ahead.
Great. Hi, all. So again, I'm Christina Barrera. I'm in my 3rd semester, or halfway through the MFA Studio Art program at Hunter, and I'm also the outgoing president of the MFA student organization. I'm going to try to keep this relatively brief, but I'm here to speak personally about the impact that austerity measures will have on my graduate program, but also try to highlight in brief some of the impacts that will be suffered by graduate students of all disciplines. So of course, one of the heaviest losses that can be sustained as a result of budget cuts is the loss of faculty. Meaningful in-person instruction experience and interaction with faculty that operate as advisors and mentors really requires a low student to faculty ratio, and is particularly in instances of group critique or group discussion, a smaller group is better than a larger group. Programs like mine that center around discussion, critique, and one-on-one guidance really suffer immensely when faculty numbers are diminished, especially in a program with as many students as mine, which clocks in about 108, which is large for an MFA program. Faculty cuts are perhaps maybe especially impacting in disciplines where students and research fellows rely on the guidance and sponsorship of faculty with particular areas of focus and expertise, especially if they're singularly knowledgeable or it's a really niche area. The arts and humanities are maybe most vulnerable here as they're typically deemed less necessary to society in general. My program is already really underfunded, so it's hard to imagine what we can lose, but there's always more to be dismantled, especially when many of our resources also rely on outside fundraising and are not guaranteed by the program to begin with. So in the past year, we have already lost an ambitious COSAC painting program, which also enriched the BFA program. Its attached MFA travel grant and the distinguished lecturer that ran it, which is a recent loss. Programs like MFA Studio Art, but also many others, are centered around physical practice and make use of and rely on facilities and equipment that require supervision, maintenance, and training. And these programs are all particularly heavily impacted by austerity measures that threaten to cut staff and resources as well as faculty. So for programs that rely on access to equipment for physically creating or for research, further lack of funding would be even more detrimental, especially when we're already pretty bare bones. Austerity measures, of course, also mean cuts to resources of every kind. So access to and quality of physical equipment, research databases, potentially library services, visiting critics and speakers, travel grants, fee coverage for symposia, conferences, and other professional and research-based opportunities. All of that may be diminished or vanished entirely to the detriment of graduate and doctoral level research, inquiry, and enrichment. Those who have university grants or other funding for research activities through the college may lose that funding, curtailing critical research and ensuring that many students won't be able to afford to complete their work at all or their degrees. Tuition waivers and stipends that make graduate work possible will also potentially come under fire, meaning that any future students may not even be able to consider graduate level work to begin with. Some graduate students may even lose access to affordable housing if the university's capacity to offer graduate housing suffers. So there's really a lot that can be lost just at the level of being a student, but on top of what they will suffer as students, graduate students are also often staff and faculty. So they will likely be the first cut or even further exploited as massively underpaid or overburdened adjunct labor. If their capacity to teach and support the CUNY system is even further diminished or taken away entirely, these effects, of course, will also ripple out to affect the undergraduate programs and their quality. Graduate students are typically no longer dependents and are more often than not self-supporting. Some support families, many support families. Almost all are both tuition-paying students and taxpayers, doubly supporting their institutions in the face of rising tuition costs, rapidly rising costs of living, and stagnant wages. Many work in essential jobs or have lost their livelihoods entirely in the economic collapse is now precipitated by the health crisis. In a self-reporting study of my program, 60% of my program has lost all or most of their income. Many of those art sector jobs will not return anytime soon. Museums are predicting 5 to 8 years for the return of some of their positions, particularly education positions. If CUNY chooses to engage in austerity measures as an already devastatingly underfunded institution, they'll be shifting even more of the costs of CUNY system onto tuition revenue rather than tax-based revenue from our wealthiest citizens. Many or maybe most graduate students will be forced to leave their programs entirely to draw out those programs. And those who are able to stay will be forced to pursue less ambitious work for want of resources and support or lack of particular areas of knowledge. These are important issues at any university, but as has been said here multiple times, CUNY plays a particularly important role as a relatively accessible conduit to upward social mobility and as an institution rooted in the working class. A graduate degree is most often thought of as an elite luxury product or pursuit, and yet they're not only increasingly required in many fields, but higher level of discourse and knowledge can continue to be further dominated by the wealthy. The MFA Studio Art program is a prime example. Consistently ranked as one of the top 10 MFA programs in the US, it's also one of the most affordable in the country despite its skeletal funding. And it's certainly the most affordable in New York City, which is of course a massive global art world center and a good place to be as an emerging artist. Hunter's MFA program plays a huge role in expanding and honing the artistic practice of a more diverse, lower income, and less resource pool of emerging artists than most programs across the US. The art world is dominated by the generationally wealthy and connected, so this is particularly important in the landscape of higher art education. Austerity measures are always sold to us as a necessary hardship, supposedly meant to squeeze students just a little and cut the chaff in order to save the institution and keep the work going through a time of scarcity. Artists are particularly versed in being the brunt of austerity measures, but of course, as we've seen time and again, neither is ever accomplished. You can look to CUNY faculty Corey Robbins' recent op-ed in the New Yorker for more on this, a really great article I highly recommend. But an institution only shines as brightly as the work of its students and its faculty. If the people who make up the institution suffer, its institution suffers. It's the institution that suffers. Not only in the work that it fosters and its environment and everything that takes place there, but in social impact and reputation, which in turn impacts public support, fundraising, and enrollment, which ultimately weakens our institutions as a whole and continues to hobble them when lean times are over. So we're fighting for ourselves, but ultimately this is a fight for the health and prosperity of our city, our society, and the future generations that will or won't be uplifted by our public works and institutions for generations to come. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christina. And thank you to all of our speakers. This was fantastic and you covered a lot. I want to sort of summarize a little bit or reiterate some particularly important points. One is that we're in a particular moment of crisis right now, not only because of the grander context of the COVID health crisis, but also specifically in terms of adjuncts being targeted at this time. And adjuncts are disproportionately people of color, or disproportionately low income and from lower income backgrounds. So like the students who are being disenfranchised in the longer history of austerity cuts, we have a disproportionate impact on people who are looking to this institution for a way to navigate social mobility, socioeconomic improvement, if you will. And yeah, so we have this context of racism, of classism, of protection of wealth where it lies. So this is not only about right now, it's not only about me, it's not only about other adjuncts who are kind of like on the chopping block, it's about the grander scheme. It's about politicians who don't value what CUNY is, what it could be. It's about leadership at CUNY that is complicit with that attitude. And we have the opportunity, the ability, and the potential strength to take greater action to challenge this trajectory of austerity that further and further disempowers members of our community. And with that, I'd like to ask if any of our speakers have anything to add, anything else that came up during other people's presentations.
Carol, you can, I think, just.
Okay. I was involved actually in the 1989 strike at City College, and amazingly enough, the tuition at that point was $400, and Cuomo had wanted to raise it another few $100s, and the students were so irate and incensed that after Reagan's people came to talk at City College, people just organized, and it was like quite a sight. And there were people who started at City College and shut down City College, and then the rest of the City University was shut down. And you saw those pictures that Conor showed on Wall Street, where 10,000 people went down to Wall Street to protest against Cuomo. The upshot of that whole thing was that so many wonderful things came out of it. The protection of Black studies, Caribbean stuff, all kinds of things came out of it, but people felt their strength and their power to be able to do that. And they managed to roll back the tuition hike that was, put there in front of them, and negotiated that there was no tuition hike, and the student leadership ended up negotiating with with the administration to get all kinds of things that had been lacking at City and throughout the City University. And I just want to say that it took that kind of activity in order to change that situation. And with giving in to politicians who are going to protect us, or unfortunately union cult leaders who are going to protect us, that is the end of any sort of struggle. And so we have to see ourselves as the creators of a new CUNY, of a new society, and not give up that power, because in fact, this is how CUNY began, and this is the tradition of CUNY. And what we need to do is continue that tradition by organizing students, organizing faculty, and ending this oppression and austerity on the part of the CUNY administration. And I'm happy to say that there was an article in one of the Albany presses that talked about RAFA. And so, and what RAFA is doing with the strike, with a possible strike. So we're making headways, and we have to make sure that other people are aware of it, that there are people who would like to say that we're, and some of my colleagues do this, we're attacking the students by not handing in the grades and all of that. And we are here to defend the students. It's not just about our jobs, but it's defending a quality education for CUNY students. So know that, in case anybody has any doubt, that we're here and we want to join with the students to make a better City University, one that's free and that has a quality education, that has the courses that people need, so that they, and all the things that they need in order to be able to ultimately graduate. But that has to be in our hands. So let's not look towards the politicians and writing letters to these people who don't care because they answer to the rich. We have to take this on, for ourselves and organize a mass movement, hopefully, if not now, but in the fall, to shut down CUNY altogether until they meet our demands.
So there's a question in the chat from Isaiah that
Sorry,
I'm just gonna...
Rachel, could I really fast?
Yeah.
So I'm Taryn, by the way. I'm John Jay, adjunct, economics department. I sort of volunteered to be the timekeeper for this, and so I'm just going to ask folks to try and keep their questions or comments to 3 minutes, if that's okay. And I will indicate to you in the chat when you're coming up on 30 seconds. And then if we hit 3 minutes and you're not wrapping up, then I'll just sort of intervene. So apologies for being rude, but just to keep the meeting going.
Rachel, I'm going to jump in just for a second. If you want to speak, please type the word stack into the chat. And I believe Rachel is keeping track of the list. Stack is basically just a list of who's talking in what order. You can also, if you don't want to talk, you can also type in your question there. And I believe Rachel's also on top of addressing those. Thank you.
So first we have a question from Isaiah, and feel free to jump in, Isaiah, or let me know if you want me to unmute you. Their question is, how can students support our professors as they organize this grade withholding? What would be helpful as support? For example, we can ask our fellow students to email their professors saying that we support the withholding of grades.
Sami?
Yes, I really appreciate that question, Isaiah. It's very simple. You actually suggested in your question exactly how students could be very helpful and in demonstrating solidarity with adjuncts. Certainly, I just want to say that no adjunct or no faculty, including full-timers, will go through such a serious action of withholding grades without it being the last resort, if you will. And that's where we are right now, because we're already receiving non-reappointment notices. So I just wanted to acknowledge that from the get-go. This is very difficult for us. So something very meaningful you could do, as you suggested, is sending out letters of support or emails of support to your various faculty. Many of us understandably have the difficult choice to make in following through with a course of action that can get CUNY's attention, right? That can potentially prevent these cuts from happening, but at the same time, it's withholding grades and will cause disruption. So just reaching out to your professors and letting them know that you support and understand what they're doing will go a long way. And just speak to your fellow students about it as well. I'm sure some others can share other ways. Thanks.
I think Haley dropped in the comments a link. Haley, I unmuted you if you want to say anything about that.
Oh, thanks. Free CUNY just created this template for sending to for students to send to the professors, talking about how we as students support grade withholding and also A for all. So just combining these two things and just empowering students and ourselves to ask and saying that this is something that we want. So yeah, I hope it's helpful.
I think one other potentially helpful thing would be to email department chairs to express your support for your professors who are in those departments. Yes, I haven't talked with anybody about that idea, but it seems
good idea.
Okay, if no one has anything else, I'm gonna go to the next person in stack. Is that cool? So it's Ikura. I just unmuted. Oh, yeah, I just unmuted you.
Okay, hi, I hope everyone is doing okay. I just really wanted to say something about our adjunct professors. They work very hard for their students. They care about us. They make sure that we're getting a proper education, even like during a pandemic, which is a big thing of them. We want those same professors also in later semesters, but the fact that they're being laid off is super upsetting. And it's also affecting us students because we love our adjunct professors. Like, they go above and beyond, just to say the least. And because they're being laid off, it also causes larger classroom sizes, fewer class options, later graduation timelines. Like, I just want to say that we deserve more, and so do our adjunct professors. Like, I don't understand why our adjunct professors are being treated like this. Why aren't they being protected from being laid off? Like, even personally, I'm supposed to be graduating next spring, but I don't know if I will, because most of the anthropology department, they don't have a lot of classes because they don't have a lot of professors as well. And the professors that we do have, they're all adjunct. And those classes are being filled up so quickly. So I can't even enroll into a class that I need to, because we have those fewer classroom options. And we can get over tallies, but you can only get over tallies if you are a graduating senior. So what if I wasn't a graduating senior? So if I wasn't, then that means that I would have to push back my graduation, which I already have to do. So thank you for letting me speak. That's all I had to say.
Thank you. Does anybody want to speak to that?
I've heard a lot of similar things from my students. Dismay at losing access to some of their favorite professors. And for my part, hearing this from my students, like, it fills my heart with love and joy. But I also, like, on top of your words of support, I really appreciate that you're here, and that you are willing and ready to take further action and plug in to find out what else we need. So yeah, stay tuned and stuff like that.
Okay, the next person I have on stack is Jay. I'm just hold on while I.
Yeah, hi, this is Jay. I'll be really quick. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Great presentations. I do hope Carol and Connor can share their cool PowerPoints. I have my own for CUNY, but yours are much better. So I hope you can share it with me and many other faculty. We need to encourage everyone to be doing these educationals in the classroom. But one slide that I might include that was left out on kind of the popular history from below is the popular assembly that was held in the spring of 2016 during a contract fight that brought students, faculty, other CUNY workers in the general working class to come together on our common demands. And we were supposed to get to our actions, which we never did. But I think that was a really important advancement to build real democratic grassroots organization in contrast to the way the bureaucrats at PSC operate. And my question is to Chris, if, you know, he brought up some really important demands or issues facing our students, lack of housing, food insecurity, and a whole host of transportation, a whole host of other issues. And if how he would see the education workers connecting their demands with the demands of the students in carrying out united struggle. I'd like to hear his ideas on that. Thanks.
He's muted.
I want to thank Jay for asking this question. And in a way, I think that we can unite those demands is like, actually, we occupy the same space. Like, I have very empathetic teachers, most of them who have been adjuncts, where I'm struggling about something and I can talk to them about my situation, right? So the fact, by de facto, by just occupying the same space, we are already, our lived experience are kind of shared. And I think that a way we can create solidarity is being aware that our struggles are very much interconnected, right? 60% of CUNY are taught by adjuncts, right? Poverty wages. I had one adjunct once tell me that she lived in a one-bedroom apartment with her 2 teenage children, right? And we have to realize that our struggles are ultimately interconnected. And that's why I also bring talking about like a social justice framework, where like we have to not only advocate for better bread and butter demands, but also social justice demands. And we have to do that within the classroom and use education as a way to change the playfield, to actually bring up that consciousness, particularly the history of CUNY. And we all have to engage in the politics of possibility, right? For example, Sami talked about how teachers are not being reappointed. We are in the midst of a global health pandemic, right? If teachers aren't reappointed, they lose their healthcare, right? Like these are real life issues that we are experiencing. So it's important in these times, particularly, to engage in the politics of possibility outside of the classroom and within the classroom. And we can see the history of CUNY. For example, Brooklyn College, I go to Brooklyn College. Brooklyn College was built in the midst of a depression. Like we also have to remember that, like in the midst of the greatest depression this country ever seen, institutions like Brooklyn College and Queens College were built. Again, it's not a question about resources. The resources is there. It is a question about power. And we need to talk strategically about how we're going to gain that power again. And in my perspective, the history of CUNY has shown that it's through militant action, direct action, and actually withholding our tuition and our labor to make our vision of an alternative university possible.
Awesome. I'm gonna go to the next person in stack, if that's cool. I have Meches.
Okay. Hi everyone, my name is Mejia Rosales, and I'm super I'm happy to be here. Thanks to Carol for share the information for this meeting, because I learned so much and it's amazing. And I want to let you know that I'm with you with all the struggle that you are with, because I'm not a student or a faculty member of CUNY, but I'm with you in solidarity with all the struggle that you are having it, because I am a leader organizer for the immigrant community, and being that I'm also a domestic worker, and I listen to all my co-workers, the struggle, their kids that are coming out from high school. It's not a way they can get education, because it's so expensive and it's so like that. And for that, it's like I'm so happy to be here, because I think we can connect all the struggles. All the struggles should be connected. And for that is my question is how the common people like me can help you with the struggles that you're having, and how we can connect the struggles, because all the struggle that you're having right now is the struggle the immigrant community is having too. And then it's like, I would like to know how we can connect the struggles and how we can support you, and you support us, and we all together fight this enable all this capitalist system and all these things that are happening to us. Thank you.
I would like to take a stab at Ms. Mejia's question. First of all, I thank you so much for reaching out, even though you're not a faculty or student or immediately connected to the CUNY community. This is your university, because all of your family members probably come to CUNY as their first choice for higher education. And you're absolutely right. Our struggles are completely connected. The same issues of underfunding in the public school system, right, for a social good, is the same sort of rationale or reasoning that is used to prevent adequate servicing of our immigrant communities' various needs, right? Our nation just passed a multi-trillion-dollar package for recovery of the pandemic, and they completely left out certain parts of the immigrant community, the most vulnerable, right? And we are talking about needing to ensure that as many of us stay indoors so that we can control this pandemic, right? But we are not providing resources to vulnerable communities who must go out to work just to keep surviving. So absolutely, all of our issues are connected. The public sector unions in other areas are also under attack. It's not just CUNY trying to use the pandemic to fire adjunct professors. So yes, we definitely need a longer term discussion on how we build together, build our coalitions, and approach power and the folks in Albany who make these allocations with the united voice that our communities are worthy of protection. Our communities' higher education institutions, especially the public ones, are worthy of protection regardless of pandemic season. Thank you.
This is Jamila. I actually just wanted to do a direct question maybe to Conor. I feel like Conor knows a good deal about this, and it could be maybe a direct response to this book earlier. But could someone maybe explain the falsehoods of the Excelsior Scholarship? Because I know that was one way that a lot of our students were intending on going to school. And to be frank, I don't know enough about it to speak to it. But if maybe Tom, so I see Tom nodding his head, or Conor could speak to it, that would be really great. Maybe that can help students also so they understand that sort of not real process, right? Thank you.
I think there's some other folks on Slack before me, but I can jump on when it's my turn. Thanks for that question, Jamila.
Okay, for Stack next, we'll have that question answered, but I have Ange.
Oh, hi. Oh, okay. Hi, how are you all? Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so my name is Ange, and I am a former CUNY student. I'm an alumni of Hunter College, and I guess I'm actually here to ask some questions just to get a better understanding about what is really going on. So let me just ask my question. I hope somebody would be able to respond. So I just want to know if all of the adjuncts are in the union. If most of the adjuncts, are they furloughed or they're laid off? Is it some adjuncts that are laid off, or is it all of the adjuncts? And also the issue of the administration, right? The people at the top, it seems like usually when you're dealing with the city, the people at the top are making so much money in terms of the administration. They're probably making 150,000, 200,000, 300,000, and the people at the bottom are not making much. So are you guys trying to even address that? It's definitely a sort of imbalance that people at the top are making so much money, ridiculous amount of money, and the people at the bottom are not making much. And Sami, you made a point that somehow CUNY is using the pandemic to lay off adjunct professors. Do you guys think they're gonna call you guys back, or is this used as a form of harassment, retaliation, or even an opportunity for them to get rid of some people? I know some of you are in the union, or engage in some sort of union activity. So I'm wondering if this is somehow a form of retaliation. And that's all I have for now. I just want to get a better understanding of what's going on.
I'll go with the last question really quickly. Thank you for your question. I think we don't have to overthink it. I think it's clear that CUNY is using the pandemic as an excuse to fire us, because remember, the budget or the state government has not told us the deficit of that is equated or connected to the higher education budget. We have not received any such numbers. And so what we're seeing here is CUNY Central preemptively is the word, asking all CUNY campuses to prepare for the cuts and actually make some cuts ahead of knowing exactly what the deficit amounts are going to be. And to answer your other part of your question, yes, CUNY knows that there is an ever-ready pool of adjuncts that can be hired at the very last minute. In fact, that's how a lot of adjuncts get their courses, is at the very last minute, sometimes even after a semester has begun. So there's always that pool of cheap available labor for the courses, for most of the courses that are taught at CUNY. And CUNY can afford to be as careless or completely insensitive to the interest of adjuncts and just lay us off en masse right now and hire those of us they need for courses that fill out in the fall. Thank you.
I have two more people on stack right now. First is Enrique. I just saw you on video. If you want.
Yeah, so hi. Well, I'm Enrique Peña, Queens College student. I'm with USS. I've done work with Free CUNY, and I know a bunch of people there. And I just had to say that, first of all, some background. Up until like about 2 months ago, I had the virus myself. I was in the hospital. I was with my dad, and we almost had things almost went south. So it was a difficult situation. And in the middle of all of that, the only people that cared about how I was, because I emailed all of my professors, was one of them, Jane Guskin, that is Yes, exactly. Yeah, they already know. So she actually messaged me every day to check how I was doing. Um, and when classes turned like to distance learning, she was the only one that actually did a good approach of, okay, we need to do something different in order for students to learn and not be burdened by these circumstances. That's something that I have full-time faculty that didn't care at all. And I never got a message from any of them checking how I was. I never got a message from Chancellor Matos with his almost $1 million wage that he has. And I just find it incredibly fucked up that adjunct faculty are going through this. So it's just mostly to ask, please, if you want to go on strike, if you want to make a public execution and a quad, I will support you no matter what. Like, just do it. I know a bunch of students that are struggling through this and are going to struggle even more if classes are canceled. I don't care what's happening, but I need faculty to do their best and just let us know what can we do. I also know that YDSA wants to help in any capacity, so just let us know, please.
I want to mention really quick that there are a few resources that have been shared in the chat. There is a link to a Google Doc where you can add your email address to get on a list. Is it the RAFA list? I'm not sure. But participants from this teach-in. And then I think there are also links to stay in touch with or stay informed with both RAFA and Free CUNY in the chat somewhere. And also they have some resources for students or professors who want to explain the grade withholding strategy. And yes, so those might be things you can check out and use to talk to other members of the community.
Leah, if I could just quickly say something to Enrique Pena's wonderful contribution. I just wanted to, Enrique, there's a reason why some of your professors that you actually have been very understanding to you. The proximity, the reason is there are more adjunct professors that teach your courses. So I think it's natural to expect to hear more from them in terms of helping you adjust to various issues that you experience as students. I do know for sure that there are full-time faculty, many. I think we're actually all the same in terms of how committed we are to student learning and student well-being in general. I definitely know that extends to all faculty, but yes, adjunct faculty are especially not doing what we do because of money. Clearly, that's not the case. So I think it's natural, and I really appreciate this that students like you are able to appreciate us for what we're doing, because it's definitely not for money. Thank you.
Connor, you're next on stack.
Thank you. Just tremendous respect for all of these questions and comments. You know, this is exactly what we're trying to show with this teach-in, is the incredible wealth and range of analysis and strategic knowledge that people in CUNY have, and that, you know, our administrators or these politicians or, you know, the wealthy elite, they can't, you know, hold a candle to us. So we deserve better. You know, I think that being able to look at the incredible callousness of CUNY deciding to lay off upwards of 3,000 adjunct faculty members, people who are already living paycheck to paycheck, when, you know, as several folks had really movingly shared, like, you know, adjuncts and many CUNY faculty were really there for CUNY students during the semester. You know, I think it shows it's like a crossroads moment of what we want the stakes of what a university to be. And I think there's a writer named Arundhati Roy who has an essay called "The Pandemic as a Portal." And I think for something to think about in this time period, like what kind of CUNY do we want? Do we want for it to be this kind of callousness, or people being thrown out on the street, or people being concerned about their lives? Or do we want for a CUNY to be by and for the people? Just a couple of different things about some of the questions that came up. So adjuncts, as a couple folks shared, adjunct faculty are in the union with tenured or tenure track faculty, as well as other college lab technicians or higher education officers. Our union is called the Professional Staff Congress. Unfortunately, because we've been in at least 3 or 4 decades of backlashes against union and workplace rights, our union leadership is shaped by that. And so they are curtailed by their inability to be able to meet this crisis by taking various kinds of mass collective action. So, I think in contrast, people in rank and file action and in Free CUNY have been really trying to figure out how to come up with an alternative strategy than just trying to appease to the CUNY administration or politicians. And what we should be trying to do instead is thinking about how strategically we shape the university with the work that we do, with our participation. And through a power mapping of the university, what we found is there are 2 significant things that happen in the university that make a semester occur. The first thing, and this is where students come in, is that tuition must be paid for CUNY to actually function, right? The thing that happens at the end of the semester is that grades must be submitted for the semester to conclude. Now, some of y'all may push back on this a little bit, but I think in between that is actually a lot of what is ideologically shaped about what an education is, but those are the 2 things that are needed for CUNY to function. So this actually shows a tremendous amount of power that students and faculty have in paying for tuition or withholding it, or submitting grades or withholding them. So that's kind of the analysis that Rafa and Free CUNY have been developing, is figuring out, well, if they're saying that they're going to be laying off this huge amount of faculty members, then let's try to withhold our grades. There's now a pledge that's going on where we're trying to see as many faculty members as possible waiting until the last day to submit grades, which is May 28th for many of us. And if we reach 70% of CUNY faculty support, then we would wait until after that. Now, don't want to keep any secrets. I'm not sure that we will be developing the strike capacity to withhold grades after May 28th. But I think that it is something for us to think about, like what kind of labor we do that makes the university function. Now, something that Free CUNY has been doing is also saying, well, listen, in addition to withholding grades, faculty members should be trying to generate support and solidarity with students by committing to an A for all policy. And Haley and others have written about that in the chat. I, for one, at Brooklyn College, am giving all 3 of my classes A's, and it really changed what the tenor of our learning was for the semester. But what we're trying to do is between now the end of the semester and then into the fall is ask for students to also step up with claiming your own power. If there's an adjunct layoff of upwards of 3,000 adjuncts, which would dramatically change CUNY, we in Free CUNY are going to be launching a tuition strike pledge. So for students to say, we demand for you to rehire these adjuncts that were laid off, and if you don't rehire them, then we're not going to pay our tuition. So what we're trying to do is to figure out doing like a kind of power mapping analysis of what CUNY is about. Just really super quick, the Excelsior Scholarship that Andrew Cuomo had done all of these bells and whistles to announce, the Excelsior Scholarship, only about 2 or 3% of CUNY students are even eligible for it. There are all of these stipulations that make it impossible for CUNY students to be able to get the scholarship, and we're advocating for a completely free CUNY beyond that. I also want to really briefly say that Haley had commented above in the comments that this isn't just issues of CUNY, this is also policing and surveillance, this is housing instability, this is low-wage work, that CUNY is trying to figure out, as I had said before, when there is a wave of actions that happen around CUNY, because CUNY it has 25 campuses around the entirety of New York City, that wave has a potential to create broader struggles that occur. The fact that there are millions of alumni who went to CUNY, the fact that CUNY has, a 250,000 students, tens of thousands of campus workers, we actually represent a powerful contingent. What we need to be doing is trying to figure out how to collaborate a lot more strategically and together across our different positions in the university. So thanks for listening.
Thanks for that. So next is Karina on Stack.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for that, Connor. I was actually just going to ask what comes next. What is the sort of next step after May 29th? I'm a adjunct at John Jay in political science. And I also just want to say how touched I have been by the emails of support that I've gotten from students after sending out emails to them and asking them and explaining to them why I'm withholding the grades till the 28th. Students, so many students have written and after everything that they've been through, so many students, as has already has been discussed, have been affected themselves physically, have lost family members, have lost jobs, lost housing. And despite all of that, to be able to think about and express empathy towards their professors in this moment has just been so incredibly touching. So I just wanted to say that, but also I'm really glad that you mentioned sort of what comes next, because that was one of my questions. I also really like the idea. I saw someone put down the idea of having a petition for students to sign. Many of my students have asked, what can they do more concretely to express their support? So I feel like that would be great. I don't know also about what the student union situation is like, if that's possible to think about getting student unions to sign on to a letter of support, because I noticed in the meetings with the PSC that was one of the sort of excuses that was used, that students wouldn't understand. And I think the more that we have a sort of concrete statement of support and solidarity from the students, the harder it is for them to use that sort of card to undermine this movement. So, and then just one last point, I wanted to know if anyone thought about, maybe this has already been discussed, the idea of a kind of popular university, or thinking about some way to maybe set up an alternative structure of study outside of CUNY, possibly over the summer, even if it has to be online now, or in the fall, where we can have courses specifically related to this and organizing around CUNY, but also other themes around a decolonial and anti-racist, anti-capitalist approach to study. I know I'd be interested in that, and I know other people who would, so I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you. And thanks to the organizers. This has been amazing.
Mario's next.
Hi, my name is Mario Rosales. I work at CUNY TV. I've been working in CUNY TV for the last 14 years. And I'm a City College alumni. I wanted to say that about joining the struggle and how the struggles are connected. My position in CUNY TV is a broadcast associate. And I think the broadcast associate position has a lot of connections with the adjuncts. Most of us are people of color, immigrants, and we are the difference of pay between like HEOs or people with permanent position is like a huge difference. So I wanted to also mention that we have a express meeting yesterday. We belong to DC 37, and we have a meeting to figure out how to organize and to show support to everything that is happening to adjunct. So I just wanted to say that we want to show support, and we count with us to, to express everything to CUNY Central that we are against these cuts. Thank you.
Boyda.
Great, thank you so much. And for that last comment. And I just wanted to throw in, I was going to explain the grade withholding strategy. Conor did a great job of that because I've been noticing, I'm a full-timer at BMCC in the English department, and I totally agree with a lot of what's been said, that like full-timers are just not showing up for students in the way that adjuncts are. And I've been talking to other members of my department and trying to get them to sign the grade withholding pledge, and I've received like a lot of blowback about that. And it's full-timers, like your general full-timer is really good at using the language of like social justice to avoid or, kind of escape their own responsibility for these sorts of actions. So I've been told that withholding grades until the final hour is unfair to students with disabilities. It's unfair to students who are in abusive relationships and need to know what their grades are so that they can register for fall classes. I've been told all sorts of things about how much this policy is evidently like throwing students under the bus, which obviously is the last thing that I want to do. But this is all why, remember that the grade withholding strategy is not a strike. It's just asking professors to withhold grades until the final hour of the contractual deadline. So it is not affecting students' graduation status. It is not affecting financial aid, and it is not affecting visa status. Full-timers are so talented at making these kinds of arguments. And so this is why I would just like really push what's being said in the comments, that you as students actually have like a really powerful voice in advocating for these actions to your professors, because if they hear from you that you support this, they are telling me that students are not going to support this. Whereas I've recorded a video for my students. I sent them all a letter explaining who adjuncts are, because I imagine that not even everyone in this call necessarily knew coming in, like what the different levels of university faculty even is. So students don't even know what adjuncts make or how prevalent it is within the university. It requires a lot of dedication to educating students about the crisis. And I think so many professors manage to just evade responsibility. And so students, again, just I guess my general point right now is that students have a really powerful voice in advocating for us. So thank you all for being here.
I have 4 more people on Stack, and it's 4:45 right now. So then after, I think I might close Stack and just have a few minutes for wrap up, if that's okay with folks. I have Jamila next.
Hi, my name is Jamila. I'm an adjunct at Hunter College. I teach in the minor of community organizing, and I'm also a graduate student, for social welfare. So first, I just want to thank my students that came. A bunch of them are in here right now, and that's super exciting because I sent you all this like very last minute this morning because I forgot last night, and I'm just so thankful that you all have shown up and you're showing up for adjuncts. I also just want to echo a lot of what Boyda said, to be honest, and a lot of what Conor said. I've had a lot of problems and a lot of trouble getting people to be on board within my own departments. And A for all of the pieces, like signing on to, yeah, Conor also goes by Coco, guys, so it's in the chat. I just didn't want to miss, just so everyone knew who Coco was. But, it's been really challenging to get folks on board. And so for me, what's been really important, as someone who actually had the virus myself during this pandemic and also while teaching, as I've gone out of my way to push deadlines out. So like no one had to turn anything in until last night at midnight, no matter what the assignment was, right? A for all, I'm not going to say it's not on the table, but it's definitely there. I guess I'm going to be a little interesting on how I say things. I think that my students are very aware of like the amount of support and the amount of like work that adjuncts have put in. And that's one of the things that I got feedback from them, was being so grateful that we actually care so much, because they have full-time professors that were stacking assignments on them during this epidemic or during this pandemic, while people were passing away in their families, while they were sick, while they were losing their jobs, while they couldn't pay for food, right? So I'm really curious when we look into the future, as you know, some students had said previously that they're in a position where they're not going to be able to graduate on time. I've had students that have reached out to me with the same concerns. And for example, if they were to cut my program, that means that anyone that's in my minor won't be able to graduate with the minor, because I'm the intro course and there's only 3 professors in my program. So I don't know, as much as I continuously push and push and push for answers, I'm not getting any, right? And I think also I put in the chat, and I'm going to put some more in there. I'm working on something right now around our articles, but I have put articles in there explaining what our relationship has ended up being toward, like, with the union. We are in the union, as Coco said, but then there's also been some really defeating things that have occurred in the last couple of weeks. So I'm going to post some articles in the sidebar here, which will also be on our website. But for now, just so people can actually read them and kind of get an idea of like what it actually means. Thank you.
Thank you. Tara next.
Hi, so I'm gonna time myself, as you can hear my timer go off. So I just wanted to just say this has been like a really fantastic success. At the highest point during this teach-in, we've had like over 90 people tuning in, and I'm pretty sure that once we go back and look at who it was, that maybe there will be more than 90 people who kind of came through to experience this. I think that, you know, if I could try and just recommend a takeaway from the call or from the teach-in, it would be to reach out as students and faculty or everyone who's on the call, is to just reach out to everyone you know and just kind of give them a little bit of what you learned during this, like raise their consciousness around it. Because I think that there are all sorts of really fantastic, creative ways that we could take united action in this struggle against austerity, but without trying to explain to people why it's so important, what's in it for them, right? That's not gonna succeed. So I think that, you know, the idea of doing this over the summer, I'm down for it. I think that there's maybe going to be a poll that goes out before the end of the call to ask to see whether or not people would be interested in continuing these educationals. But yeah, I think just the most important thing is to try and just raise awareness about what is going on, raise people's consciousness about what austerity means, especially when it's aimed at CUNY. So yeah, thanks.
Awesome. Thank you. Remy?
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I want to give a shout out to all my students that came from BMCC to support, you know, me and other faculty. Unfortunately, I'm one of the non-reappointed adjunct faculty for the fall. And, you know, while at BMCC, I enjoyed my time there. And also, you know, I cared a lot about my students. But I think one way to actually get this, you know, meeting that we have right now, to get it like out there, would be for Rafa or PSC or Free CUNY now to create a link that students can actually sign on to in support of the adjunct faculty. So now that we have, you know, we've captivated their attention, you know, with this meeting, we should quickly like get a link out there so that they could add their names, or even if they want to provide some short statement in the reasons why they support adjunct faculty. And that could be, you know, from, I mean, it could go out as far as we want to people who would be able to support adjunct faculty. You know, I was not reappointed again. I got my letter before the May 15th, but there was no reason. So like many of you said, it may be a way to like retaliate or get rid of people who were doing maybe much better than some full-time faculty, because believe it or not, I've seen some syllabi and I'm like, oh my God, you know, how do you get away with, you know, teaching this type of content and stuff like that? But of course, you know, we're adjuncts and, you know, I don't feel like I was used by BMCC at any point. If at all, you know, I really gained a lot of insight, you know, a lot of opportunities where I was able to like collaborate and, you know, get a lot of help from my department. But unfortunately, I also don't understand the reason for the non-reappointment. I don't know if it's because I'm not certified to teach online, but my department knew that I previously taught at Bronx Community College and also at York College, where I didn't need any certification to teach online. I will be happy to work on the link and then circulating to my students so that we can get this movement going. And I hope it doesn't stop here today. You know, let's continue to push ahead. Even though I'm not going to be working at BMCC, I'm still, you know, I'm going to be available. All right. So, you know, call on me anytime. But the good thing I want to leave everyone with, I was actually offered classes at your college. So hopefully those classes get filled. So I'm still going to be part of CUNY, but if at all anything is going on at BMCC, I'm always going to be there for my students. So I don't want them to think that my absence of not being reappointed is going to be the last that I'll be there for them. All right. And I wish everybody all the best.
Thanks, Remy. In the chat, a lot of folks were chiming in that they were interested in, specifically Haley from Free CUNY was interested in connecting with you and working on that with you. So if you want to share your contact information, either individually to her on the chat or in the general chat, that would be great. And then the last person on stack is Carol.
I wanted to say also that I think this is a wonderful beginning. And want to thank Mitch for coming also, and Andrew Cuomo, who unfortunately is now the governor, who's cutting major funds from CUNY, has also said that he wants to reimagine education. And we could all imagine what reimagine in his mind means. So what we need to do is reimagine education in the way that we believe that it could really satisfy people. And that means doing, not just making sure that people have textbooks or that they could afford to go, or even that it's free, but that people have housing, that people have food. All of that is part of, and Meg just does a lot of that also. She does a lot of organizing. So hopefully we'll be able to call on her to help. But that's how we reimagine education, so that people live a quality life, so that they can be educated. I wanted to say that in 1976, when, as a way of getting tuition pushed through, the other Cuomo offered TAP as a SAP in order to be able to say, see, it's not so bad, or people can afford to go. And even at that point, it was clear to me that that was the end of Free CUNY. And I think the Excelsior program is similar to that. It's a way of saying, listen, we're opening up education for the people who need it, the people who deserve it, and therefore you don't have to worry about the fact that there's really going to be education for the New York City students. And we cannot be fooled into believing in any way that the Excelsior program isn't meaningful. It, as Conor said, it gives the 2% of the students, and even some of them, after they've been accepted into the program, have been denied it or had a hard time actually accessing it. So we don't want their deals. What we want is an education where the community at large, where working class people who started City College in the first place, will reimagine education in the way that we want to have it, that is free education, that is enough faculty, that students, and that really is going to take a major mass movement. We're not going to get that with just, Rafa. We need to organize the New York City working class and beyond in order to be able to win an education that's going to really be meaningful for the working class. So let's, move this along. Let everybody, thank you for that suggestion, Remy, for people to sign on. And we're all going to be organizing throughout the summer and into the fall.
All right. We're almost out of time. You may have seen a poll just popped up on your screen. If you don't see it, click on the polling thing at the bottom. We are interested in continuing these conversations and having further teach-ins throughout the summer. So please chime in and let us know if you are interested in continuing this. Other actions, Rachel has posted in the chat several times a Google Doc where you can add your email list to stay in touch, or your email address. If you are a faculty member and you're not connected with RAFA, please join Rank and File Action. Everyone is welcome to follow RAFA, join the email list and follow on social media. If you're a student, please look into Free CUNY if you aren't already connected. And again, I think everyone is welcome to follow on social media. Taryn's suggestion, I think that was especially important. She said that we need to reach out to everybody we know in any kind of position who's connected to CUNY or a part of the New York community to talk about this, to talk about different potential actions, to talk about the broader context. Yeah, so keep talking about this, even when we're not all talking together. And Pedro, I really liked Pedro's idea of a teach-in week at the beginning of fall. But again, that's going to require more organizing and more conversations. So again, please do, Rachel just posted it again, add your email address. And then it looks like Haley, Remy, and Jamila, and maybe others are working on a petition for students and other resources for students, perhaps. So make sure to get in touch with one of them if you're interested in chipping into that particular effort. But otherwise, I think we're just about done. Am I missing anything? I don't think so. Okay, so thank you again to all of our speakers. Thank you to all of our participants. You had incredible questions, incredible insights to share. And I'm feeling very optimistic about maintaining momentum and rolling this forward. And yeah, so stay safe, stay healthy, take care of yourselves, take care of each other. And yeah, thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Leah.
Thanks, everyone.